This is Brett Easton Ellis, and you're listening to the Brett Easton Ellis Podcast. And we're recording this podcast today on January 8th, somewhere on North Doheny Drive, just below Sunset Boulevard. When I look back at the mid to late 1970s and early 1980s in American film, the second half of the decade of the New Hollywood, whose death knell began with the collapse of United Artists due to the financial disaster that was Heaven's Gate, the irony of the most artist-friendly studio in the history of Hollywood being undone by its own largesse is something almost too painful to contemplate. This second half of the New Hollywood years, I would say, is completely eradicated by the end of 1982. Or maybe it was the end of 1981. There were still big auteur movies being greenlit, or had been greenlit and were now being released. I think of Martin Scorsese's The King of Comedy. That might be the very last one, released in February of 1983, a $25 million nihilistic comedy. Yes, $25 million in early 80s dollars for a comedy. And that might have fit into the moment of 1974, but in 1983, confounded and turned off audiences. The King of Comedy did. Other New Hollywood films that arrived after the crash of Heaven's Gate include, I suppose, Warren Beatty's Reds and Brian De Palma's Blowout, a political thriller which was envisioned as a much smaller project, but when red-hot John Travolta said he wanted to star in it, things changed, and De Palma's budget was suddenly something like 3 times its original size because of Travolta's presence. And though Blowout is now considered De Palma's masterpiece and one of the great films of that era, it flopped in the summer of 1981. Audiences turned off by the movie's darkness and one of the bleakest endings of the New Hollywood filmography. One of my favorite actresses of the period co-starred in Blowout with Travolta and was in 2 or 3 more of my favorite movies from that time, Dressed to Kill, Carrie, and I am going to add Steven Spielberg's 1941, which I still think is an amazing movie. Just visually, it's stunning. Nancy Allen was a fixture for some of us movie mad geeks in that decade, and the De Palma films she starred in were nirvana for us and remain the best movies De Palma ever made. And Nancy Allen married Brian De Palma, and they were together for about 5 years. Nancy Allen is here today because I wanted to meet her, and I wanted to talk to her about some of these movies and others, notably the most popular movie she was in, which was Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop from 1987 and its 2 sequels. And when a friend connected me to Nancy, I told her that one of the things I wanted to know and was going to ask her is, why haven't you written a memoir? Well, she has just finished one, so we'll see what happens to that. But I know I will be one of the first people to buy it when it is eventually published, especially because you were like in the center of things or near the center of things during this pivotal moment in Hollywood history. The reason why I believe we met is I was having dinner with Bruce Wagner, which I do every month or even twice a month. And we were talking about, for some reason, like the movies of the 70s and then crushes that we had. And he was talking about the actresses he liked. I was talking about some of the actors that I liked from that period. And then I think he asked me, well, come on, you weren't completely out of the closet. There must have been crushes on certain actresses. And I thought about it and I said, well, yeah, the last one was probably Nancy Allen. That was probably my last female crush in a movie. And I was Dressed to Kill in 1941. So you can take that however you want, but that's one of the reasons why I think you're here. Because Bruce said, I know Nancy Allen, and that is how Nancy Allen is here. I was just going to take this chronologically just to set up for our listeners where you're from and what your trajectory was at the beginning. I know that you were born in the Bronx, and I know that your father was a police lieutenant. I knew you had 2 siblings. Okay, I don't know what your mother did, but I know that you were kind of raised in a working class area. First, it was I know you moved to Yonkers, but where were you originally?
I was born in the Bronx, right, near Bedford Park and the concourse near there for anyone who knows that area. And I went to Mount St. Ursula, an all-girls Catholic school. And when I think I was just about 10, we were moving to Yonkers. I don't know what that was about, but we did, in fact, move there to a new building up there, and it was really nice. And I don't know, there was always this feeling, I've got to get out of here.
Well, what was the childhood like growing up in the 1950s and becoming an adolescent in the 1960s? I mean, one of the things that I now look back on when someone asks me that question when I'm interviewed, How different was it from how kids are kind of raised today? What are your memories of that time? And really, what is the contrast in a way between how you were raised and how maybe kids are raised today?
Well, I guess I have to start and just say I grew up in a very tumultuous household. And there was that. I had two older brothers. I was the, where'd she come from? Not a planned pregnancy, and the only girl. And my mother was very protective of me. Certainly, when I look back, kids were playing outside. You know, you could go out, you could do things by yourself. I was not allowed to. I was very cloistered. I was very, very shy little girl. I think that certainly in looking at how children are raised, even by my contemporaries, I mean, there was no questioning. This is what you're having for dinner. This is where we're going. This is what you're doing. And there was no, let me explain to you why you don't have to, why you can't do this. It was just because I said no. And if you're getting a little bit rambunctious, there'd be a look from my mother. No questions asked. So I think, there was, I don't know whether to call it order. It was just it was a strict environment. My parents were born in 1911 and 1916, so they're coming out of the Victorian era. I mean, it was just, that's how it was, and it felt normal. I look around today, I was standing in the market one day, there's a little boy, he was maybe 3 years old, and the mother said, well, where would you like to go for dinner tonight? Oh, I don't know. Well, do you want to go there? No. And I'm thinking, you're asking a 3-year-old where they want. You're going to be here all day, lady. Move on so the rest of us can check out. So I don't get it. I'm old and cranky at this point.
Same here. I also had a childhood where everything you said was true about it, but there was also a kind of hands-off approach as well for me and my friends, I think, growing up during the era I grew up in, which was the late 60s into the 70s, where my parents really didn't care where I went. There was no helicoptering, no hovering. Of course, there were no phones. So my parents were just be home for dinner. And then I would play in the streets of Sherman Oaks or where we lived in the valley. And it was fine. And I walked to school at 5 and 6. I mean, I tell this story all the time whenever this topic comes up. But it was just I asked my mom the other day, you had no trepidation letting your 5-year-old kid walk 8 blocks to the elementary school. She said, absolutely not. We didn't even think twice about it. It was completely fine.
Well, that was true for my brothers. But, remember, my father was a cop. It's
Right.
you're going to get kidnapped. Don't talk to anybody. So I was really... I had no freedom. Let's just put it that way, until I was about 14 years old.
What was your movie-going experience like? Did you see a lot of movies? And what movies from, especially those 2 decades, the 1950s and the 1960s, were kind of the most impactful, or do you have the strongest memories of?
Well, my mother took me to the movies from the time I was a little girl, but I do think, I like to say that movies were my first love. Being in this really tumultuous household,
Tumultuous how? I'm curious.
Tumultuous.
You said that twice.
So my oldest brother, who was 8 years older than me, really, he had a genius IQ. I think he was bored in school. I don't know what it was, but he kept getting in trouble. So my father, you mentioned hands-off, he was very hands-on with him. He was a cop. This was a mess. So there's a lot of that. A lot of violence could erupt, depending on the time of day or what happened that day. So I escaped. I realize this now. I escaped I had a dog. That was my best friend since I didn't have a friend in the neighborhood. But we had something called $1 Million Movies. And that was on WOR. It was Channel 9 in New York. And they would play a movie for an entire week, sometimes twice a day. So I could just sit there and watch this movie again and again, which drove one of my brothers crazy. She's watching that movie again, Mom, kind of thing, get her off the TV. So I think it was mesmerized. I loved musicals. I loved anything Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers. For a little girl, kind of odd. I did like film noirs. I think of Double Indemnity and, movies like that. It seemed like every time I'd watch it, I'd see something different in it. Or the other side of that is that it was then the familiar. It was something I could count on. So I knew what was going to happen, which I didn't know what was going to happen in the house. So I just really loved all kinds of movies. I remember seeing The Hunchback of Notre Dame for the first time and being devastated by that film. And I love them.
Were there favorite actors or actresses that you gravitated toward that you really responded to? I mean, this was the era of the method actor and of James Dean and Marlon Brando and figures like that.
Well, I was watching movies earlier than that, and I loved Carole Lombard. I thought she was really funny and clever. You know, I loved her movies. I loved Jane Fonda. I thought she was an incredible actress. I loved Shirley MacLaine. I really wanted a career like hers in my later, not as a child, but I really never saw myself as a pretty girl. I never thought much about that, but I thought she was so appealing, and she was a character actress. Yeah. She had characters with depth and kind of just passion to them. And so those were probably my favorite actresses when I was a little bit older.
Yeah, the Shirley MacLaine thing is interesting because she started out, I think, in a Hitchcock film, and she really wasn't a sex bomb at all. Mm-hmm. She was just cast. It was that moment. It was like she moved from that to The Apartment and to a number of films where she was a leading lady who was a character actress. And that was something that was somewhat rare at that time, and then it became a kind of more the norm. But she had that lengthy career because she didn't fit into that particular mold that you could be trapped in. But you never thought of becoming an actress when you were a kid or a teenager, or was it mostly that you did want to become a dancer?
I was really focused on being a dancer, and that's what I wanted to do. Although when I look back, I was obsessed with movies. I do want to tell you this because it's kind of for me, it's just funny. When I was 10, my parents took me to the movies, and I don't even know if they knew what they were walking into, but it was Psycho. So that had, as a 10-year-old, that was really, I think I was afraid to go into the bathroom ever by myself.
It must have been traumatic.
It was totally traumatic.
I mean, I was into horror comics, and I was into a lot of that stuff as a little boy, as a kid, buying comic books at the newsstand. And I remember certain movies that my father took me to. It was a very different period. Parents just went to the movies, and you kind of went to what they saw. Yeah. There weren't a lot of kid movies. So my father took me to Marathon Man and to...
Oh my God.
And I wanted to see certain horror movies, so he would take me to these horror movies in Westwood or wherever they were playing. And it was kind of my education, and in a way it was kind of toughening me up in a way. Mm-hmm. I saw something in horror movies that kind of mirrored the tumultuous family I was growing up in. And they seemed to confirm something to me about the randomness and the darkness of the world. And so I think that's what I related to. And also, movies for me were the secret thing. They were things you weren't supposed to see. You're watching private moments between people that you're not supposed to see. So there was a voyeuristic element to it as well that I really responded to as, I guess, a burgeoning voyeur. I don't know. But you attended the High School Performing Arts.
I did.
This is the FAME school to study dance. But something happened. Something dissuaded you. What happened?
Well, yes, I went there. I auditioned, and I thought I wanted to be a dancer. And by the way, as in the movie, you can just switch from one department to the other, change your mind. You can't do that. But I went there. I was very unhappy. Everything that I loved about dancing was spoiled for me because it became something you're graded on and not just something that you love, doing something you love. So at the end of the year, they spoke to each student, and the teacher told me, she said, "Well, it's been quite a year." And I said, "Yes, it has." And she said, "But we just don't think this is a good fit for you." She didn't say that. They say that now. But basically, you're not invited back. And I went, "Oh." And I was terrified to tell my parents, and I didn't. So I had that secret all summer long. And then I had an idea. A friend of mine left in the middle of the school year, and she found another school that she liked. So I thought, my father hated the idea of me going to performing arts. It was something my mother cooked up. So I went to him and I said, "Dad, you were right. That was a big mistake. I just can't go back to that school. but there's a very nice private school that I think would be a better fit. So that was a big old lie. And he said, you see, Flo, I told you it was a big mistake. And so I ended up in, there were two schools. There was PCS, Professional Children's School, and there was Quintano's School for the Young Professionals. And it was on 56th Street, just near Carnegie Hall, which I took a lot of dance classes, a lot of jazz classes there. And so I was enrolled in that school. And it was really great. I mean, there were people there that were working or already either as actors and musicians or people who wanted to be, or just really terrible students that had nowhere else to go, kind of that kind of school. And classes were half an hour long, and, you could wander, you could go, not go. I mean, I came with my books, and the kids saying, what are you doing with your books? You don't need those here. Oh, I don't. I hate school. Good. This is good news for me. So I ended up there, and it was in that school that I met a gal who was in my class, and she said, my mother would love you. You'd be great for commercials. She's a manager for teenagers. And I said, well, do they pay you for that? And she said, they do. So that was the beginning, and so she started sending me out. There were tons of commercials for teenagers, and the first 3 months, if there were lines, I'd leave, like copy. I'd excuse myself and say I have to go to the bathroom, and anyway, I got caught, and that's when I started studying, because I better learn what I'm doing here. So I stopped walking out of these and, auditions and learn what I'm doing, get a little credentials here.
But you did a lot of commercials. You did everything from like Breck shampoo, Pepsodent.
A lot of Clairol commercials. When I started, I did the first Cool Whip commercial. I ate Cool Whip and strawberries for 2 days. They offered me a case. I said, no, thank you. And, everything. I sold everything. And to the point where I got to the point I thought, there's really nothing left for me to sell on television.
What did you learn from making TV commercials?
Everything.
It's so interesting.
Everything. I was in acting class, and they'd say, oh, you're a sellout. Why aren't you doing plays? But you know what? It prepared me for the film business. I learned the repetition, keeping it fresh, where's my light without looking for it, hitting my mark, interacting with people, knowing where the camera is. That was such a great school for me.
How do you, I don't know how old you were at the time, 21 or 22, get that small role opposite Jack Nicholson and Hal Ashby's The Last Detail, which was written by Robert Towne? Both Nicholson and Towne were nominated for Oscars, and the film is remembered as a big moment in new Hollywood history because it cemented Nicholson's stardom, and it pushed the boundaries for what language could be allowable in a movie. Even though it was not a big hit, it made a big impression. How did that come about for you? Because you have a pivotal scene in that movie as Jack's date, because you're not living in LA yet, right? You hadn't made the move. How did this thing come apart, this kind of classic movie now? You got this role.
Well, it was cast in New York, because it was being filmed basically on the East Coast, Toronto and Washington, different places, and I met Hal Ashby, and he just spent some time talking with me, really. I didn't read anything. And I don't know, months went by. I didn't hear anything. I didn't think anything of it. And I got a call from my agent saying, they want you for this movie, and I'm sending you the script. They sent it over to me. And I got the script, and I started reading it. And it wasn't the role I played. It was actually the role that Carol Kane played so well. And I read it, and I thought, oh, yeah, no, I can't do this. My father can't see me naked. That's not possible. And so I called, and Lynn Stallmaster was really upset. He was casting. I called, and I said, listen, I'm so sorry, but I know I'm not going to be able to be naked and act at the same time. So a few days later, they called back and offered me the role in The Party opposite Jack.
What was Jack Nicholson like? What was Hal Ashby like? These two who became these towering figures of the new Hollywood.
It was so dramatically different than being on a commercial set. It was just a very quiet environment. Hal was very chill and spoke very softly and didn't really give me much direction. He said, well, let's just try it. It was more, there was a line or two, but it was really more about the improv. And we did a couple of takes, and they were really excited. They really loved what I was doing. And the thing about Jack that's so interesting, so we did that scene. Everybody was really happy. And then we had the scene, we're sitting across one another at the table. And this was such a striking memory for me because everything was really very noisy on commercial sets and click and camera roll and action and da-da. Anyway, we're sitting and talking just like we're sitting and talking. And I didn't even hear the camera turn on. I didn't hear or notice the clappers, And all of a sudden, Jack just became this other character, this other thing. And I'm watching him, and I'm really not getting what's going on, which is fine because it really worked. I was kind of stunned, and it really worked for the character. So I would just say there's an ease to his work. It didn't seem very complicated to me, and he just rolled right into the character. So he clearly does his homework and knows who this person is that he's portraying.
But didn't something strange happen to you during that scene while you were shooting it, in terms of there was a take that you thought was great, and then did someone compliment you or say something, and then you kind of froze on the next take? I read somewhere about that. Is that true?
It is true. Again, I'm so introverted and shy, and it's like, don't pay attention. Pay attention to me, but don't pay attention to me. And when Hal said, "Oh, that's great," and Jack said, "Oh, that's great," I literally felt so embarrassed. I can't even explain it. I felt so embarrassed. And, this is crazy. I haven't thought about this in a long time. So we broke for lunch shortly after that, and I thought, I don't want to have an episode after lunch. So I had a glass of wine. Now, what that did was somehow it made me very red in the face, and I think it was Mike Chapman who was the DP on that, and he said, "What did they do? What did they do to your makeup? Why are you all red?" Now I'm getting embarrassed. Now I'm blushing. It's getting redder and redder. He says, "I don't know how to light her," and I just thought, is there any hole I can fall into here and get off this set? But it was a great first lesson, and what it did was it planted that seed, because I could see the actors, the process, and I thought, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do.
I just found out something while I was doing some research on The Last Detail, that when it came down to the two actors for the Randy Quaid role of the young sailor, they were Randy Quaid and John Travolta.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Did you know that?
No, not at the time. It was something that I read later. Yeah.
It's so interesting. Mm-hmm. So did being in The Last Detail inspire you to move to LA and pursue a career in movies? I mean, what was the plan then? I mean, did you have one? Was there an idea in mind? Because from 1973, 1974, 75, until you got Carrie in late 75, what was your life like? What were you doing in LA?
I was living in New York. I was living in the Village, which was that's where my heart was, in the Village. I loved it there, and studying on and off, and doing commercials. And literally one day I woke up and I said, I can't do this. If I don't go to LA now, I'm never going. So I packed up. I let go of my apartment, which people don't do. I had no plan. I took my dogs and moved to LA. I had a few phone numbers of agents, a manager that I had, or an agent I had in New York. I can't remember that part. But so I called these agents when I got here, and I thought, I'm going to call. There was only one woman. I'm going to call her first. I like women. I feel safer with women. So I called her. It was Joan Scott, and she had received my picture, and she was very abrupt with me on the phone. She says, "Well, how old are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm 25. Now, I looked about 18, but I was 25. And she said, "Forget it. Go back to New York. It's a waste of time. You're too old, and it wouldn't be worth my time. If you were a man, I would invest the time in you." And I just got off that call, and I thought, oh, really? Really? Okay. Now I'm motivated. So I ended up getting this agent, Bud Moss, very nice man, who did nothing. So I sat here. I moved here end of August, September, October, rolled around to the beginning of November, And I thought, well, this is it. I can't support myself here. At least I know I can work in New York. This acting thing isn't going to work out. Now I think about that today and how long people are trying to get a role, trying for anything. And I was going to, at that time, the Beverly Hills Health Club for Women, which was on Santa Monica Boulevard. I was coming out of the steam room, and I hear, Nancy? Is that Nancy Allen? And I looked up, it was Harriet Helberg, who was a casting director. She used to work in New York, and she was out here. And she said, well, what are you doing out here? And do you have an agent? And I said, yeah, I do. And I told her, and she said, that's odd. I'm casting a film now. And I called him, and he said he didn't really have anyone that was right for it. So she says, but you know what? Tomorrow's the last day of the auditions. Why don't you come over, pick up the script, and come in tomorrow, because at least you'll get to read for something, and you'll meet an up-and-coming director. And I went, okay. I was so excited, and get me out of the gym. I hate gyms. That's to tell you how bored I was here. I still hate them, and I still join them. So I got the script. I think I picked up the book at the library, flipped through, looked for the character's name, and I stayed up all night, and I wrote a biography of the character, and all that. I was just so excited for this chance to read for something. And they were casting in that one of those wonderful buildings on Fountain Avenue near Sweetser, and there was a line out the door, guys and gals paired up, and I was paired up with this one young actor. I don't know who he was. We were the last couple, the last two people to read for Carrie. I didn't go to that. A lot of people think about the audition that had Brian De Palma and George Lucas, and it was a big casting. I had nothing to do with that.
That's what I thought. When Brian De Palma and George Lucas were doing a simultaneous casting call for Star Wars and Carrie, so many people went to that. But that was not this.
Okay. No. This was down to the wire kind of casting. And so I left there, and I heard him. He came down the stairs, and I thought, that's Brian. I said, I'm thinking in my mind, gosh, she's young. I had this notion that somehow commercial directors graduated to film directors, and so they must be really old. Clearly I was wrong. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. And then we started to do these few scenes, and I heard him laugh once, and I thought, oh, that's good. And anyway, it went well. They thanked me. I went home, and then horrified to find out that I'd left my legal pad there with my biography of this character. I thought, oh my God. And there was a message from Harriet. I thought, oh my God, I don't want to. So I said, Harriet, called her back. She says, no. Forget the pad. She says, I'll get that to you. They want a screen test. I had, really? Screen test? Screen test was like something out of old Hollywood. So I was very excited about that. And she put me together. She gave me the name of an actor, Michael Talbot, who was also in the film. If you guys can rehearse. And we did. And the day of the screen test, I got there, and it was a very, wasn't a studio. I don't even know. I think it was a Culver City, but it was an office probably about this size. And Michael and I did the scenes together. And then he left. They dismissed Michael, and then in walked John Travolta. And I looked at him and thought, oh my God, he's Billy Nolan. He is that guy. And he sat down with me, and we just started acting. We literally had immediate chemistry with one another. It was effortless. And then I was dismissed, and I realized he was testing two people. So I thought, oh, this is awful. Whoever rehearsed with him is going to get this part. It's over for me. So I was very surprised when, I think it was on a Thursday, I got a call from Harriet on a Monday night whispering, they're looking at the test. They love you. You're going to get this part. Called my mother, of course, to tell her. The next morning, I was going with a friend to have a champagne celebration breakfast, and the phone rings, and I grab it. It's Harriet. She says, oh, I shouldn't have said anything. I'm so sorry. They're going to look at actors in New York. I went, but I told my mother. It's like, you cannot go back. What am I going to do? So, but they're going to hold you, and they're going to cast you in this other role, which you couldn't even, I don't know what the role was in the movie. And So that was in November, and November, December, January rolled around, and I got an invitation. They called and invited me to see, they were screening Obsession. So all the actors were there, all the key players from the film, Amy, John, Billy, Sissy. But Betty wasn't there because she lived in New York, but there we all were. And after the screening, one of them, I don't know which one, said, well, I guess we all got the part. And I just said, well, I didn't. And they just kind of looked at me. And I said, but they did give me another part, and whatever the name was, and they were like, oh, I'm not sure what that is. And I went, neither am I. But then I got a call from Harriet, said, can you come by the apartment tomorrow, and Brian wants to read you again with Amy. So we did, we read, she left, and then Brian and Harriet left the room for about 5 minutes. They walked back in, and he looked at me and says, you're Chris. We want you for this part. And you would think I was elated, but I wasn't. It was so anticlimactic.
That was, I mean, just for listeners, they went to see Obsession, which was Brian De Palma's movie, a movie that he also released in 1976 that came out a few months before Carrie and was quite successful. And so so you were seeing it kind of before it was being released, just to get a sense of who this director was. Mm-hmm. Had you seen any of his early films? Had you seen Sisters or Phantom of the Paradise or anything?
I saw Phantom, and I loved it.
I did too.
So I was really excited when I heard that he was that he had directed. We didn't have Google, we didn't have IMDb in those days, so it was really just by asking questions of my agent, who's this director, what have they done? You know, that kind of thing.
I don't know why I assumed that you were in LA earlier and that you were part of the whole like Margot Kidder, Jennifer Salt thing in Malibu where everyone was hanging out, and that, oh God, Nancy Allen must have been there, but you were not part of that scene.
No, I'm a little bit younger than all of them, and so that's
right. That's why you were not there. Well, Nancy, what can I say? What more can any of us say about Carrie? I mean, it's just become such an integral part of pop culture and such a blazingly great example of what was possible in New Hollywood, transcending genre, for example. And it's just become this almost absurdly famous movie that all of you were making in 1976 with, I cannot imagine any notion whatsoever that you would be talking about this as this, what's an event film. So, here we go. What was it like shooting Carrie? I know that you said that the main thing you remember about shooting Carrie was that it was fun. It was so much fun, and that John Travolta and you became quite close during that. And I also have to ask about John Travolta because he was really so strikingly handsome. Did you ever have a crush on him? And if you didn't, why not? I mean, even if you were seeing someone else at the time, did he have that, or was there something different when you were in person with him?
First I just want to say this is the 50th anniversary this year of Carrie.
Right. It came out in October or November of 1976.
That's right.
Nancy, I cannot believe it.
No.
I cannot believe it.
I can't believe it either. And, I don't think any of us had an idea. We just were so happy to be working. And what can I say about John? For me, I didn't have a crush. He was like a puppy dog. He was so sweet and funny and kind and supportive, and he was just like it would be, I suppose, if he had a younger brother. That's what it felt like for me. So people did think that we had an affair, and they wrote about us, and Hollywood Reporter knew to you it was supposed to be us, but we didn't have that kind of relationship. We had a great friendship, and he lived on Johanny. And I lived on Cynthia Street, and he was down the block, I was up the block, and we'd pick each other up and drive to set. The thing that was interesting about that is that Kotter, Welcome Back Kotter, had come out, I think, that fall. So by the time we finished the movie, which was sometime in April, and we drove to a location, wherever it was, they had to put up barricades because fans were tracking him. But we had fun, and we thought we were the funny ones on the set because the crew loved us and laughed at everything, all of our fights and slap you stupid and you idiot and, fuck you and all of that. But he he was just so kind to me. And one night we came out of Daly's at MGM. He looked at me and he said, you know, you're going to surprise everyone. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you know, they'll look at you and think, gosh, she's so pretty. And then they're going to see your work and say, wow, she's really good. Well, that meant everything to me, because I looked at him. He's the professional, television actor and now star. So all the girls loved John, but none of us were dating him.
I wonder if all the girls liked William Catt.
Oh. Well,
personally, William Catt was more my type as a Southern California boy. Got me mildly roused.
American Hero?
Yes, he was.
Yes, and he was the curls, the blonde, the whole thing. He and Amy had been boyfriend and girlfriend many years before the film. Billy was more reserved. John was more fun. Billy had a kind of a serious vibe about him, at least to me.
You know, when Chris Hargensen really became a new kind of archetype. You really hadn't had that kind of bad girl before, given this kind of profane existence in a teen movie. And it really did, when I'm looking back on Carrie, it was a connection between your performance, your presence, this role, and then just De Palma letting people elevate themselves into places where this genre didn't typically go. Whether it was Sissy Spacek's performance, Piper Laurie's performance, this was a new bar was set for this particular kind of movie. And in a lot of ways, if you look at Carrie, it's bigger than just a horror movie. It's also about filmmaking. It's an exercise in style. It's a personal statement from De Palma using this, this piece of, I forgot what Pauline Kael said, unassuming Stephen King hokum or whatever she said in her rave review of Carrie. I mean, I think of how much fun the movie must have been to make, because you're all young, you're all making this movie. You're not doing necessarily Shakespeare. You're also working with a very technically controlling director who has a vision, which I would not think would be frustrating, but I would think you'd feel somewhat safe in that you know this is going to be a good movie and that he's got it down visually. For example, I mean, was it fun having, Betty Buckley slap the hell out of you during Countless Takes?
No, it wasn't fun.
So that has to be the one time that wasn't.
By take 20 or whatever, it was not fun anymore. And poor Betty, she was frustrated and rubbing her hand, but we did have fun. I'll just say we had fun doing all of it, because everyone was cast perfectly. It was really lightning in a bottle, that film.
It was.
It really was lightning in a bottle. Betty was a little bit older than us, but only by a few years. But she was the mother on the set, if you will, and very protective, I think, of all of us, and particularly with all the nude stuff and. I
wanted to ask it. I mean, you must have had trepidation, but what was the trepidation about the nudity in the locker room scene that opens the movie? How did you kind of get over that and go, okay, I think I can do this?
All right. So I think I told you when I was cast, Brian had all the cards, all of his storyboarding, and you're going to be nude here, and John's going to rip your shirt off here, and here's the nude scene, but there's going to be a lot of fog. You'll see an arm here, a leg there. It's all going to be very beautiful and very ethereal. And I went, oh, that sounds fine. And there was, safety in numbers. I have a great picture from my personal collection of all of us sitting in our robes on the steps outside the school waiting hours, 6 hours. They were shooting poor Sissy in that shower. And then we got in there, got in the shower room, and it was just Brian. At that time, it was Isadora Mankowski, who was later fired from the picture, and the focus puller. So it was just, there's no sound, so it was just that. And they pumped the smoke in, the fog, and we shoot it, and the next day we go to Daly's and we're watching, and oh you can see everything, and I mean everything. That's when I learned about asking what lens. After that, what lens is on the camera and what are you seeing? Here, down to my knees. So this was everything, and it still looked nice, it was still beautiful in slow motion. But after the dailies, we're out in the lobby, and Betty said, well, I don't know. If I were you girls, I'd be really angry about this. And somehow I just thought, you know what? It looked beautiful. It's part of the film.
The whole movie looks beautiful.
Yeah.
It's an absolutely stunning looking movie. So when you saw Carrie all put together, what did you think? I mean, I assume everyone thought they were making a teen horror movie that was slightly elevated, but did you were thinking something else when you saw it completed? Was that the movie in your mind, or did it become another movie?
Well, I didn't know what kind of movie it was going to be. Watching dailies, which we were allowed to do, you could get an idea of, you're not seeing edited film, but you're seeing raw footage, and the work was really good. The acting was good, the camera, all of that was beautiful. But seeing it for the first time, which I did, it was on MGM at their big theater there. We had a big premiere screening. I think with the music, it was just breathtaking. And it's a movie, my love. And there I am, in a significant role. And everyone was so good in their roles. It affected me. I could feel for Sissy, because I hadn't seen any of that work, that relationship with Sissy and Piper, and the evolution of her character, that arc of her character. It was stunning.
You said that the one place you never felt self-conscious was in front of the camera.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about that dynamic that makes you relax or comfortable? What is it about that?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. First of all, I'm not me. I'm somebody else. I'm there in that other person's skin, wardrobe, hair, makeup, all of that. But I do think that all of that work in commercials prepared me for the comfort. It was a comfort zone. Also, I have to say, particularly on a sound stage, it just felt like a giant womb. It was so safe. So I actually liked it.
The next movie after Carrie was Bob Zemeckis' directorial debut, I Want to Hold Your Hand, in which you have top billing. And it's the first movie I think Steven Spielberg produced or executive produced. How did that part come about, and what was Zemeckis like? And also, for those who don't know, what was the movie about?
It's set in 1964 in New York City, and it's about the first time that Beatles came over to the United States to be on the Ed Sullivan Show. And this movie has 4 girls in New Jersey, for different reasons, are going to make their way into New York City and get to the Ed Sullivan Show.
Why can't we find this movie anywhere? Because I saw it. I saw it twice in April of 1978 at the UA Theater in Westwood with my friends. Why can't music rights? What is it about?
I have no idea. It's not the music rights, but it's I should remember, because I'm very close with Bob Gale, and who co-wrote it and produced it. I don't know, and I only have a copy of it because he gave it to me. So I've asked the same question. I love the movie.
I loved the movie too. That's why I asked, because I always want to show it to Todd or to someone else. Or did you have any sense that Zemeckis was a really smart guy and he's going to have the career that he did? He was a 26-year-old kid. He never made a movie before.
Well,
what was your feeling about him?
Well, I didn't realize he was the same person that I actually, Steven Spielberg showed Brian and I Bob's student film, which was, I think it's called A Field of Honor. And he said, let me show you this film. And Brian said, please, I've seen too many student films. He said, no, you really have to see this. So it was remarkable. But I didn't know that was the same person. When I went in for the reading, I ran into a young man in the hallway. He said, Nancy Allen, I just love you. And Carrie. And I said, thank you. And went and signed in the waiting room. And when I walked into the casting room, Sally Dennison said, this is Bob Zemeckis. And I said, you're the director? He's like this tall, geeky kid. And I thought, okay. And then he said action. And we did the scene, not with Bob. I did it, I think I read with Sally or her assistant, somebody. And then he gave me some direction. I went, I don't know how to explain it, but at least for me, you can really sense, you feel safe when you're in the presence of someone who knows what they want, who has a vision, and it just feels different than it does with some mediocre or hack or whatever. And on the set, he knew exactly what he wanted. He gave great direction. I loved working with him. I really did. I would love to work with him. I would have loved to work with him again. And I almost did, but didn't work out.
In 1979, you're part of the ensemble of Spielberg's World War II comedy, 1941. I saw it opening night when I was 14. I've always loved this movie. You did not have to audition for that role. Spielberg just gave it to you. And you kind of spend most of the movie with Tim Matheson in a plane cruising over Los Angeles, and then in the climax, Hollywood Boulevard. I would think that would, up until now, that was probably the most physically difficult role in a way of you turning around in the airplane as it's doing swoops over Hollywood Boulevard. What was that set like? Because, you read stories of the massive cast of that movie was on the set basically every day for however long it took to make that movie, which was
6 months.
But it wasn't supposed to be 6 months. It was supposed to be
14 weeks.
14 weeks. What was that set like?
Oh, God. I was one of the last people to be cast, by the way. People keep saying, Nancy, and he'd say, no. Anyway, he finally cast me. He said, maybe if I didn't know you, I would have thought of it. But I loved the character. It was really fun. And I knew Tim Matheson. We had the same agent, so I was very excited to work with him. Got to know Treat Williams. Wendy was on it, and Bobby DeCicco.
So many cute guys in this movie.
So many cute guys. And John Belushi, who I loved beyond. I just loved him. And maybe had a little secret crush on him, a little bit. Just because he was so charming. He just demanded your attention. But what was the set like? It was just the never-ending movie. When we shot 6 weeks straight of nights, I'd go into the makeup trailer, they'd be setting my hair, Stephen would come in, how's everybody? And I'd say, Stephen, I'm never going to work tonight. And he says, I know, but what else do you have to do? I mean, it was like his party. So the motorhomes and the honey wagons were lined up, and everybody would just sit there all night long talking to each other, doing probably things we shouldn't have been doing, but everybody was doing then.
Well, 1941 has a reputation for being one of the, let's say, cokiest sets in Hollywood.
Absolutely true.
And that it was, and how cokey was it? And was this your first introduction to it?
Coke?
Yeah.
Oh, good question. No, someone had offered some to the cast on a night shoot on Carrie. Well, it's like having a cup of coffee. That's what people would say then.
Having a cup of coffee, right.
It's the same thing.
It'll just keep you up.
It'll just keep you up. No one thought anything about the addiction. So it was so cokey on 1941, my first day of shooting, which, much like today, I got lost. I was so lost getting there. The AD would never let me drive myself to work again. But I got to the set, which was out in Indian Dunes, and Tim Matheson. So it's John Belushi, Tim Matheson, Warren Oates, and me. And Tim grabs me, he says, if you have any Coke, don't give it to Belushi. He's going to ask you, don't give it to him because he did all of mine. And I'm like, well, I don't really have any with me, but okay, good to know going forward. And that night, first night of shooting, we were shooting. He was doing the whole thing on the wing of the airplane and, let me hear your guns. And he fell off and cracked his rib. And they took him away in an ambulance. So then they had to figure out what to do. So that's when now you see him flipping on and flipping off and flipping. So that was all a stunt person. So I would say, yeah, there was a lot of cocaine because there were endless days, endless nights, no end in sight, people running around saying like, it's funny, right? I mean, it's Spielberg, it's funny. Everybody was very insecure. And it was sad because the original script that I read, Zemeckis and Gale, was a great script. And it was sharp and it was funny and it was cynical. And in fact, I always thought Bob should have directed it because it was more his sensibility. But people wanted to be in this movie. It was Steven Spielberg. So he'd run into people and they'd say, oh, can I be in the movie? So he'd ask Bob and Bob, write something for so-and-so. So they kept adding and adding and adding stuff. And I really think it was because he really didn't have a producer to say, no, this is the thing. This is what we're shooting. This is what we have to stay on track. Nobody would say no to him. So I would just say he wasn't really supported in a way that a strong producer might have supported him.
Coming off two massive hits also, I think everyone thought lightning was going to strike three times. I actually do. And I think, again, bringing up Pauline Kael, who wrote about 1941 in a review she did of Used Cars, where she talked about how she just thought it was an amazing, I think she called it orgiastic experience, and that the bigness of the movie was part of its joke, and that the gargantuan was part of the comedy of it. And I think that people were gunning for Spielberg in a way at that time. I think the movie's much better than what its initial reception was. But when did you marry Brian De Palma? Because sometimes I think it's 1979, or was it earlier? 79 to 84.
Yeah, it was actually January of 1979, and I was in the middle of shooting 1941.
What was it about Brian? Were you looking to get married? Were you looking to have kids? What was the idea?
Not really. I mean, we'd been together, by the time we got married, we'd been together 2.5 years, had broken up a couple times and gotten back together. And, we loved each other. I mean, that's my version. I loved him. I enjoyed him. We both loved movies. We had a lot in I had a lot in common. I thought he was also very funny. However, my mother did say he's very entertaining, but this is not someone you marry. Nancy, I should have listened, maybe.
He does write you a great role as Liz Blake in Dressed to Kill, his 1980 giallo thriller, which got great reviews, was a big hit, and you were married to him. What was shooting that movie like, and what did you think of it then, and what do you think of it now? I watched it last night with Todd again. It was brilliant in 1980. It's even better now. It has aged beautifully. Movies aren't made like this anymore. They just don't look like this. I don't know of any directors, even the good ones now, who has that kind of eye, the precision of it. It's just kind of riveting. I've seen the movie 20 or 30 times, and I just can't tear myself away from it. And the same thing with Blowout, which we also watched last night. Why do you think Dressed to Kill was such a big hit in the summer of 1980? Besides it being a terrific movie, and because there's a lot of terrific movies that fall into the cracks, and it did benefit from great reviews. I mean, most prominently, again, Pauline Kael, David Denby, among many others, and it was a big audience success. Any ideas why that movie hit at the right time?
I honestly couldn't say why. I can tell you that the script worked.
It was a hot script,
It was
too.
a really good script. It didn't change. The only thing that was removed was the opening, which was originally a man shaving his chest, and
that's right.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. But again, the script was perfect. You cannot get a good movie without a good script. So the script worked. The casting was right. The setting in New York was perfect. It gave it a whole kind of sexy vibe, and it sucks you in. I guess in a way like Psycho did. In that way, people wrote about it that way because it sucks you into Kate's life and her drama and her, sexuality, and then you're taken off guard, and then my character takes over, who has a different set of problems that she has to deal with. But also her sexuality, in a way, is more commanding because she's very comfortable with it. And maybe there was some of that at that time, that women were becoming more comfortable with their sexuality and not as inhibited. I will tell you, at the time in New York, people were outraged by it. There were women, it's just, he's misogynistic, and oh my God, and it's awful, and look what he does with his wife, and has her strutting around, and lingerie, and this and that. I never felt exploited. Every choice I made was my own in that film. And I think, like any good movie, at least for me, once it starts, everything is gone around you, and you're sucked into the world of these people and this story. And that film is relentless. The pace is relentless, and it unfolds very quick. It's quick. It's only, I think it's about 90 minutes long. It's not a long movie.
No, 98 minutes.
Yeah, so...
Are you bothered by violence in movies?
It depends on the violence, and it depends, like, what kind of violence. I don't like cruelty, I don't like to see anything that's considered torture. If anyone's hurting an animal, I'm out of there immediately. Just slasher, blood and guts kind of violence, I don't like it. But if it fits and it's not what I consider exploitive, I'm okay with it.
It really is true about De Palma. His reputation is kind of different from the reality of his movies and how theatrical the violence is, how operatic it is. I've watched the elevator scene, the slashing scene in Dressed to Kill, I don't know what, 30, 40 times. I always see it as a suspenseful, kind of very scary work of art. And the blood is obviously not real blood, and it's not what someone slashed to death would look like. If it was, then maybe you'd be horrified by it. But it's just it's dreamlike almost in a way, and so it works on a different level. And I think that De Palma often gets accused of being a gory director, when in fact, in Blowout, I mean, I think there's really only the only blood is really very faint thing around your neck at the end, and it's not. He's not a gory director. He's not like the giallo directors that he sometimes is copied from. Speaking of Pauline Kael, who was an early champion of De Palma and gave Blowout its greatest review in the New Yorker, did you ever meet her?
A number of times.
Really?
Yeah.
What was she like?
Oh, I loved her. Well, she loved me, which I liked.
Yeah.
She was charming, and well, I suppose maybe not to everyone, but she was with me, and I usually would meet her in screenings at Magno on 6th Avenue. There'd be a lot of screenings there, and Pauline would be there, and she'd always talk to Brian and not flirt with him, but kind of, because she really liked him. She just, she was passionate about film in a way that, and wrote about it in such an interesting way. Whether it was a good review or a bad review, you had to read it. Reviews now, I don't know. Movies now, I don't know. I just don't know. She was one in a million.
I think her review of Carrie is so beautifully written. It's called The Curse. And if anyone wants to begin reading Pauline Kael and understanding her, I would start with that review and many of her reviews of the movies in the mid-'70s. But that's just a great review. And she started champion De Palma when a lot of people weren't with Phantom of the Paradise, because that's where I discovered De Palma, when I was reading Pauline Kael. I also did not know that you were nominated for a Golden Globe for Dressed to Kill as Best Young Star of the Year. Who won? Because you didn't win that, but do you remember who did?
Of course I remember.
Who?
And it was, Best Female Star of the that particular year. It's an award that doesn't exist anymore.
No.
So it was me, Bette Midler, Nastasia Kinski, oh my God, I'm blanking on her name, from Raging Bull, fabulous.
Kathy Moriarty.
Kathy Moriarty. It was Nastasia Kinski.
For Tess?
For Tess.
Wow.
Whatever.
Easy. So you're on a run, Blowout falls just a year later. Brian De Palma was at first hesitant to cast you in the lead because he didn't want you to be known for only working for him in the movies. And he also had envisioned these two characters as older than you and John Travolta. I mean, De Palma was thinking more along the lines of like a Jimmy Woods or a John Hurd. That's Hurd, not Hurt, listeners, but the American actor John Hurd. Guys like that. And then John Travolta read the script, wanted the role, and he lobbied hard for you. Travolta lobbied hard for you to play the female lead, Sally. This is all kind of true.
Kind of true, yeah. I mean, it is. I mean, definitely it was different actors, as you said. And I was actually in Europe doing press for Dressed to Kill. And Brian said, I talked to John. He wanted to know what I was working on. And I gave him the script. And I said, well, what are you going to do if he likes it? So Brian said, no, he's going to see that it's not really the character for him. And I said, I don't know. I'm not so sure. It's a really good role. So that's exactly what happened. He liked it. And I said, well, now what are you going to do? And Brian said, well, we did ask him, George Lito, who's the producer, and George wanted me for the movie, which I didn't know until later. Brian said, well, who do you see playing opposite you? And he said, well, I'd love to do this with Nancy. And I went, oh. So Brian said, so how do you feel about it now? I said, sounds like a really good idea to me. I couldn't wait to work with him again.
But you had initial problems with Sally. How did you overcome those problems? And what were they about this character when you first read her?
She was just so, loser, downtrodden, no hope. And I have a problem with every character I play. I never know how I'm going to approach it. But this one, I remember saying, couldn't she have a goal? Couldn't she have something that she's excited about in her life to, make her a little more interesting? So, we talked about it and came up with this idea of her wanting to be a makeup artist and seeing herself, envisioning herself doing makeup for movies. And some of that grew out of, we did a lot of improvisational work, John and I did, so Brian could rewrite for the characters.
Not really change the plot or the
No.
story, but the dynamics between
Exactly.
the two characters, yeah.
Exactly. So then, giving her that, I kind of fell in love with her. I had this vision. I remember waking up one morning and I thought, oh, she's just sort of like a little rag doll. I could see the curly red hair and, and once I had that, I had the visual, which Anne Roth, talk about, for an actor to have great costume designer, great hair, great makeup, they're all part of creating a character with you. So then I got excited about her.
I had read this recently, and it made complete sense to me. I read somewhere that there were two performances that you were thinking about when you were playing Sally, and one of them was Giulietta Massina from La Strada, and Judy Holliday in Born Yesterday. Makes perfect sense now watching the movie, which I did last night. So this was your new conception of this role compared to what was in the original script.
Yes, and you look at particularly Judy Holliday. She had that kind of, that little voice. So I have a thought about that. Women, I've known women like that. I have a thought about women like that. It's this idea that they don't really want to grow up, and they just want to seem, I don't really know, and kind of sweet and innocent. And it's almost like a device so that you don't have to be responsible, So I think that pinning that voice, getting that sound down for me really made the character. Because then I could forgive her. I could see this is someone who doesn't really want to grow up. She doesn't want to take responsibility. She's just a scared little puppy, even though she thinks she's tough.
Is it true that the editor, Paul Hirsch, who had cut De Palma's movies, and you thought that Sally shouldn't die at the end? What was that about? How would that have worked? What was the reasoning Sally shouldn't die at the end?
Well, Paul didn't think. I don't know whether he was, on my team. George Leto, too. Here's my feeling. I can tell you mine for sure. My feeling is you can kill the girl. You can kill her. But there better be a reason to cry. There better be a romance. Because, Brian talks about Romeo and Juliet. I said, but there's no romance. Why are we going to mourn her? That was I said, they've got to have something. There's got to be something between them. And George Leto, then it's like, John Travolta can't kill the girl. He can't, especially not in the summer. That was the other thing. David Denby said, you can't open this movie. He was a great critic for New York Magazine. You can't open this movie in the summer. But anyway, we went back and forth on that. And of course, I really didn't have any say in the matter. It's Brian's movie. He's going to do what he wants. He didn't really listen to anybody about anything, which is what makes him unique. So as you know, Sally does die in the film.
Well, that's the great metaphor of the movie, and that's what brings it around from the beginning, and that's what gives it that unbelievable punch at the end. So it's just had to happen, What is De Palma like on the set? I think you said somewhere that he can be miserable on the set at times.
He hates shooting a movie.
So it's it's like Hitchcock. It's the planning of the movie. The shooting's a nightmare, and then the editing is the post-production.
Yeah, he loves all of that. It's just the waiting. I don't want to be here. I remember thinking on Carrie, oh, he looks so sad. I thought, oh, I'll go over and talk to him. He must be really sad. He was bored, while everything was being set up. So right before we started, I think in the beginning, one of the big setups was the parade and hundreds of extras. And I remember walking over to him and saying, look at this, look around you. Isn't this incredible? All these people are here.
Almost $1 million.
To realize your vision. I hate it. Just like that. You might as well just put a gun to his head. So he did not like shooting a movie.
You bring up David Denby, but because Blowout's released and there are fantastic reviews, and let's be honest, there were some bad reviews as well. And Filmways thought it was going to make between $60 and $80 million in 1981 cash. De Palma coming off Dressed to Kill, John Travolta, this thing is a thriller. And it bombs. It completely bombs. Why do you think Blowout failed in its theatrical release? Besides, and it's true, it makes total sense, releasing that at the end of, during the summer of 1981, it is an autumn movie. But what else was it that people, it took years and years for people to, well, some people did love it flat out, but it took a long time to get the reputation it has now.
Many, many years. I do agree with David Denby. Looking at movies at that time, there were very specific kind of movies that opened in the summer and very specific movies that opened in the fall. It's dark. It's dark. It's very, noir, and I don't know what to say other than it was, I think, the wrong place at the wrong time. There were a lot of bad reviews, by the way, a lot. We had stacks piled up on the dining room table and went through all of them looking, for the good ones. And sweet John Travolta came in and said, "Isn't it great? We had all great reviews," because his manager only gave him the good ones to read, So there was that. But, it was really sad because I have to say, of all my movies, and I don't know, I can't speak for any, John or Brian, and certainly not for John Lithgow. I mean, I just loved the movie. I thought it was a great film. It's still probably my favorite role. And it was really heartbreaking.
I mean, did the commercial failure of it affect you as an actress or impact you as an actress? I mean, in terms of like more jobs, things coming in. And did you ever have an idea of how the business saw you? Like a moment where it crystallized and you thought, oh, this is how they see me. Did that ever happen? And did that ever happen in the wake of Blowout not really landing or happening?
I think it was more devastating for Brian than for me. I was really upset at some of the reviews, the things that were said that were really cruel, that broke my heart. But I just based on my whole career as a young, leading lady, ingenue, that whole period, people were really put in categories. And as I started saying to you, I saw myself more as a character actress. And the fact is that there were a lot of roles that I couldn't even get a reading on because they had me as this sexy, blonde actress. In fact, when I did the buddy system with Richard Dreyfuss, which was really fun, and the opening scene, I'm in lingerie, and anyway, it was a fun part. And Gene Siskel, who I love, got to meet him. He wrote, talked about how funny I was. He said, "Will somebody please, she's so good, somebody please just give her the role that's really good for her and don't put her in lingerie." I thought, yes, Gene, you're my champion. So it was very challenging. And I did think the Ann Lewis role would change all of that for me, but it really didn't.
RoboCop.
Yeah.
Before we just get to RoboCop, just briefly, and I know you're probably not going to answer this, but you starred in the Philadelphia Experiment and Strange Invaders. You got top billing, but also in the Philadelphia Experiment, you end up dating your co-star Michael Paré, which some of us are probably quite jealous of. I mean, I guess, should we be or not? For those of you who don't remember Michael Paré, Hollywood tried to make him a star a few times, most notably in Eddie and the Cruisers and in Streets of Fire. It just never really happened for him, and I sometimes wonder why. He was very cute.
Very cute.
And you met him on Philadelphia Experiment, and you were together for a little bit.
I blame that on cocaine. Because honestly, with Michael, as gorgeous, and he was gorgeous then, it's just don't speak. Don't say anything. Just put a gag. Just let me look at you, basically.
Oh, that's...
Not the sharpest bulb, whatever.
But I also, another thing that I just want to know is that you were living, I think, in the Chateau Marmont when you were filming the Philadelphia Experiment. What was it like living in the Chateau Marmont at that time? Because the Chateau Marmont in 83 or 84 was nowhere near the chateau that we know today, which is a luxe, super glam, almost a 4-star hotel. There was no restaurant then or bar or anything in the chateau.
I moved into the chateau, actually, in when I was doing 1941. So the fall of 1978, I was living right around the corner from here. My apartment had been broken into, and Brian said, "You need to move into the chateau." And I said, "What's that?" I mean, I didn't even know it existed. And so I moved in there. I was living there for 6 months. And every time after that, for the next however many years, I would stay at the chateau when I came out here to make a movie. I loved it because it was a hideaway. It was private. I mean, you went there for privacy. And you could have a little apartment and a kitchen. Not that I ever cooked anything in it, but you could have that. And there was a guy, who would answer the phone, "Hello, Chateau." Everyone referred to him as Lurch, and he kind of looked like that. But it was really cool. And you could walk out the door if you wanted to, and there at your footstep it was the Imperial Gardens or Carlos and Charlie's, and of course the wonderful liquor locker, which I think is still there, Greenblatt's Deli. I mean,
I lived in the chateau in January and February of 2006 while I transitioned from New York to LA, and I got a good deal on like room 64 or whatever. I knew the manager there, and this was at the height of the popularity of the restaurant, a big scene. And yet, after like 2 nights there, I realized I cannot pay this room service. I cannot for 2 months order, 3 margaritas for friends, and they're like $50 each, double margaritas. So I would go down to the liquor locker and then I would store it, or go to Trader Joe's and just stack the refrigerator, because you would think hotel living would be so fabulous, but if you're actually paying for it yourself, it's not. But anyway, I was just reading just quickly about RoboCop. Peter Weller, who played RoboCop, said that because of the RoboCop costume, it was by far the worst experience he had as an actor. And Verhoeven has said that shooting the movie was miserable because of all the special effects, the difficulties that came with it. But Miguel Ferrer, who co-starred in it, said filming RoboCop was the best summer of my life. Where are you in all of that?
Well, I really loved it. I had a great experience. I loved working with Verhoeven. I can understand Peter. The first suit that they made for him was horrible. And it took forever to assemble every day with screws and screwdrivers and putting him together. And it was brutally hot. They'd bring in this big hose from an air conditioning system to try and get it down. I mean, it was, for him, that part of it was terrible. But I will say that going back to talking about great directors and working with great directors who create an environment on a set, he is just someone who is thrilling to work with. And the frustration for him is that you couldn't move as fast as you wanted to because, in Holland, I guess where he was making his movies, they weren't wearing lavalier mics. They just shoot and record the sound later. So it's like, oh my God, you're conspiring, the sound people, you're conspiring to ruin my movie. But he was passionate. He had a vision. He brought an energy all that energy in the movie, that's Paul. That's all Paul. And I loved him, and I loved working with him.
You agreed to star in the sequel, RoboCop 2, and what was that experience like, especially working with the director of that, Irvin Kershner, who had directed, among other things, The Empire Strikes Back and Eyes of Laura Mars, among many other films. I think you said it was the worst experience you've had. The worst experience in my career. I agreed to the sequel, which was originally going to be directed by Tim Hunter, who did River's Edge. And I thought, perfect choice, same sensibility. His script was good. And then, so I said to John Davison, oh, yeah, I'll do the movie. And they made whatever deal they made. And then all of a sudden it was Irvin Kershner, who I didn't meet until I got to location. And we had lunch, and he spent the lunch talking to me about all my contemporary actresses, and oh yes, and she's one. I kept saying, yeah, oh, I love her, and all of that. He never really talked to me. It should have been a clue at that point that he didn't really like me. And I can honestly say that every day I was on the set, he humiliated me. So much so, after the first 2 weeks, I wanted to bail from the film. And I held it together. I really broke down the last day of shooting. It was like I couldn't take it anymore. And John Davison, who's so sweet, and I love him, and he said to me, came to my dressing room, he said, I guess I should have talked to him about it because he asked to recast me. And he said, it's a sequel. You can't recast her. So I'm just going to say his energy was just a miserable person. He just looked miserable. He acted miserable. And when I was interviewed a few years ago, I don't have words bad enough to describe that experience. And someone said, well, he died. And I said, yes, not soon enough. And I mean it. I just
Hated him.
Wow.
Hated him. He was
what do
mean.
you do? How do you cope on a set like that when you have so many more weeks left knowing this? What do you do as an actress? What do you depend on?
The other people, you know, your relationships with, you know, the crew and the other actors, and being of service to the film, and how do you bring yourself, you know, your best you, and okay, oh, you've given all my lines to somebody else. Okay, well, what do you want me to, oh, you want me to turn my head? You just have to maintain. I don't even know. I look back, and in a way, I wish that I'd walked off 2 weeks in and said, you know, I can't do this.
But of course, if you did that, that has its own whole other set of problems in terms of your reputation as an actress.
Yeah, of course.
What did you like most about being an actress?
It's the creative collaboration, finding, first of all, reading a role and finding a way to fall in love with that person. Finding the identity, like, who is this? What do I have that I can bring to this how do I bring her to life? It's the imagination, the wonder of it all, and then having it come together is also very exciting for me.
And what do you like least about being an actress?
Well, it's very unstable. It was a very unstable profession, and you at that time you were at the mercy of being cast in something. And what I love about these young women today, they accomplished something that I tried to do. I actually developed something with Bill Condon, who I worked with, met on Strange Invaders. They form production companies, they develop projects, they do what they want to do, and I just applaud every single one of them for changing that whole paradigm. And that was something I wanted to do, but I just never accomplished it.
So it was the lack of stability in Hollywood, but were there other things that you eventually really didn't like about Hollywood in general? And was there a moment where you thought, I'm done, I don't know if I can do this anymore?
I think it was a series of events in my life, and I lost both of my brothers in my mid-40s. I was very disillusioned after the whole RoboCop series. When my brothers died, it just something changes you in a way, and you kind of look at your life, and I'm looking at these movies, I'm looking at these roles, and I didn't really like them, and I thought, I just don't want to do this. How can I always found things. I was so fortunate in the time that I came up, and so fortunate with the directors and the creative people that I worked with. And then all of a sudden, it's just mediocrity. I'm getting a call from my agent, and he's saying, "Oh, I have an offer," and instead of saying, "Oh, tell me about it," I'd say, "What's the money, and how long do I have to be on it?" And then I'd say, pass. So I wasn't getting the roles that I was interested with, and something in me was saying, I don't even want to compete for it anymore. Something in me died. I don't know. Maybe it's life. When you have loss like that, your life looks like maybe you should do something different. Maybe you should make a change. Maybe you should find something that inspires you in a different way.
Well, you are executive director of We Spark Cancer Support Center. It was founded by your co-star in both I Want to Hold Your Hand in 1941, Wendy Jo Sperber, and it is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. Can you tell us what We Spark's services are and how this all came about for you?
Oh, I love this organization. It was the greatest gift that Wendy ever handed me. It's the greatest gift I ever had in my life. Wendy was a dear friend, and she had been diagnosed with breast cancer and noticed that there was a void. There weren't the type of services that she was looking for, nothing out there. So she was determined to create a place that would create services for cancer patients and their loved ones, defined as either family members or close friends who were emotionally invested. Well, I had lost my father to cancer, and I said, well, I can get on board with that. So I first got involved as a celebrity golfer to help raise money for the organization. Quite honestly, I didn't really know what she was doing, but eventually she found the place. She said, oh, come on over, I want to show it to you. And she said, you know what? You're into all that woo-woo stuff. I want you to be the creative program director. And I looked at her and I said, well, what's that? And she said, well, you get to pick all the programs. So I thought, well, I don't know anything about that. And she says, sure you do. Sure you do. So it started kind of like, let's put on a play. You create the scenery, I'll make the costumes. And, each day I'd find these interesting healing kind of programs, some things that I had tried myself, hypnotherapy and yoga and meditation, things that were very soothing. So we started in 2001, and Wendy unfortunately passed away in 2005. And I was determined to keep this. By then I knew what we had and how many people we were serving, and I was determined to keep this thing going. So friends would look at me and say, "Oh my God, aren't you so sad? Isn't it hard for you not to be doing something creative?" And I just said, "But this is really creative in a different way." So creativity is a transferable skill. The nuts and bolts of it I had to learn because I did not have the credentials to do this. You know what I mean? So I love what we do. And the pandemic actually helped in a strange way. So we're able to deliver services virtually to people who couldn't get there. They're too sick, they don't have transportation. And I love it, and I'm really proud of it. And I can't believe that 25 years has gone by.
Changing direction, what movies have you watched recently, old or new, that you have really liked? Do you keep up with new movies?
Well, in my mind, I keep up with new movies. I find it really hard to motivate myself to watch a lot of them.
Or even rediscoveries, or seen an old movie that you hadn't seen. That's become a big pleasure for me because I just don't go to the movie theater anymore. I know this is award season, so as a member of a guild, I get all of these screeners, and I can tell you most of them are not worth watching. I was such a movie mad guy, and I just can't believe I've become this person who really just relies on old movies now on the Criterion Channel and things like that. But every now and then, an old movie that I hadn't heard of is recommended to me, and that's kind of my excitement.
I can't say that I've seen anything recently that I haven't seen, but just the other night, Avalon was on Turner Classic Movies, the Barry Levinson thing, and I hadn't seen that in forever. And I really enjoyed watching that.
Someone told me how great Diner was, and I remember liking Diner in 1982, and I was kind of afraid to go back to it because maybe it had not aged well. And it was my happiest movie-going experience this year. Have you watched it recently? It's fantastic.
I'm sorry to tell you, I've never seen that movie. So now you're going to make me go and watch that movie.
Well, I don't want to make you have to do anything. But do you watch TV? Is there anything you've watched that you want to recommend on TV-wise?
Well, I think, what did I watch recently? I watched House of Guinness, which I really liked.
I haven't seen that.
I loved it. I really loved it. And then I watched Death by Lightning.
Yeah, I watched it.
Because I love both of those actors.
Right. Michael Shannon and, yeah.
Yeah. I love,
the guy from Succession.
Yes.
Matthew.
Yes.
Exactly. I'm blanking on his
I
name.
know.
Okay, yeah.
It's pronounced differently than I always think it is. Yeah, but he's a wonderful actor. I watched Pluribus.
Yes.
Okay, I started it. I thought, I hate this.
I did too.
But something brought me back to it.
Okay.
And I ended up watching it, and I liked it. I stayed with it. I had initially 2 complaints really about her. And as it turns out, I think it's quite a tour de force performance because she's on screen a lot by herself. But there were certain mannerisms. I didn't like her voice. She did something with her mouth, and I thought, well, someone please tell her to stop doing that with your mouth. But it's interesting. It's interesting. That's what I can say about that. What else have I seen? Oh, I watched, is it The Diplomat?
Yeah.
I watched that. It was good. It was okay,
My boyfriend's binging that right now, and I started it, and I just really wasn't captivated enough. Yeah. A show's really just got to grab me. I'm not, I have friends who say, well, the 4th episode, it gets really, really good, and I'm like, I just don't have 4 hours of my time to do that. What did I see recently? Black Doves with Keira Knightley and Ben Whishaw, which is on Netflix, was very good, and I was very surprised. It's a British spy thriller kind of thing. Nothing that I'm really that into, but this was pretty good. I want to ask you about finishing a memoir, and what are you going to do with it?
This is something I thought I would never do. I've been asked many years by many people, you have to, your time in Hollywood was so significant, which didn't seem like it to me at the time. Of course, on the other side of it, I realized how extraordinary. I was right in the middle of everything. that line in Hamilton, in the room where it happened, I feel like that's what I lived. I have an agent, so I suppose he's going to look for a publisher for it. What I've learned is so much in writing it. The perspective on my life, things that I went through, the changes that I went through. I do feel that the purpose of it is not, it's about my movies. I write about that. I write about those experiences. I write about my family. I kind of weave it in and out. Love and loss of love. You know, you think forever and it's not forever, and what happens. And it's resetting. You know, life is so unexpected. The things that I went through that I thought were the worst things that could have happened to me ended up being really that portal into another chapter and another chapter, and reinventing myself and learning new things. And I hope that it would inspire people who might be in the mid part of their life and they don't know what they want to do, and they see a future for themselves, to see, you know what, it is possible. And don't put yourself in a box. You're not just what you think you are. You're so much more than that. And I really do believe that every person is a unique person with unique gifts, talents, and abilities, and you have to show them to the world, use them in any way that you can to fulfill yourself and to be of service to the community, because there's a lot. I think it's my life at this stage of my life is all about the people. You know, you're pursuing as a young person, but at some point it has to be about something more than all of that. And I hope it gets published. I hope so. If it doesn't, I'll self-publish it and, you know, take it to shows or make it available to fans and people, certainly to women that I know that I think it could be very helpful to. And I hope to inspire people that to take risks. If you can imagine yourself doing anything, that's the jumping off point. Then take a chance. You know, what is that old thing? If you think you can, you're right. I don't forget who said that, but that's kind of the truth.
Our last question that we ask all of our guests: what do you think of the Eagles?
I love the Eagles. I dated Glenn Frey.
Best answer you can. Best answer.
When was this?
Well, this was, I'm going to take you back to the fall of 1970, must have been 77. And Amy Irving and I, could have been 76 after the movie, I don't know. Amy Irving and I were at Dan Tana's having dinner, treating ourselves. Stephen was who knows where, and Brian was in New York. And at the next booth was Glenn and Don Henley from the Eagles. They said, "Hey, you girls want to join us?" Sure. I don't even think I knew really in that moment who he was. But so long story shorter, we kind of paired off with the guys. And Glenn he actually took me to the Universal Amphitheater, which was outdoors, to see Randy Newman after we had a sushi dinner together. He was a gentleman. He was so nice. And we had a lot of fun. And he took me home that night. I mean, we were all very promiscuous in those days, but not so, okay. However, I don't know how much time later, I was in New York at Brian's, but I was, it was kind of like that. And I gave Glenn my mother's phone number, and he called and asked for me, and he said, "Oh, Mrs. Allen, you have such a nice, sweet daughter." He invited me to a concert. They were playing in Long Island. He had a limo come pick me up in the city, where I went to my friend's house and I was picked up there. We went to see the show. We all had dinner, and then he sat me on the side of the stage, off to the side, so I could see everything. And then that was over, and then we got in the car, and then we went back to New York. And I don't think I ever saw him again, but we did have a moment that night. I'll just put it that way. I think I saw him one more time, and he was a great guy. I know he was supposed to be a wild guy, but he was nothing. He was just a gentleman. He treated me like a princess, and I saw him many years later, And I have a fabulous signed photograph from him because I think everybody was really wild and drugs and all of that. And, we were both not doing any of that anymore. And he said something about living a healthy life and, being happy. And I just feel so sad that he had to go so soon.
Too young.
Too
soon,
young.
Yeah.
But I have all their music in my iTunes. It's in my car, and I listen to it all the time. It's just the greatest.